He tried to steal my kids, so I took his retirement instead. I used to think my life was on track. I was a young mother, newly married and doing my best to raise a family. But everything changed the moment our first child was born. That's when my ex decided I shouldn't work anymore. Not asked, decided. He forced me to quit my job, stripping me of the only financial independence I had. I didn't know it at the time, but that decision would trap me in years of emotional and financial warfare I never saw coming. At first, I tried to see it as temporary. Maybe staying home would be good for the baby. Maybe we could make it work. But over time, the cracks in our relationship widened into canyons. His behavior shifted. What started as condescending remarks and occasional yelling soon spiraled into full-blown verbal and emotional abuse. And that wasn't even the worst part. Some days, he got physical. Not often, but enough to make me feel like I was living with a ticking time bomb. I began walking on eggshells in my own home, and I was doing everything I could to keep our children safe. When our second child was born, I thought, maybe foolishly, that the new baby would soften him, that maybe we'd start fresh. But by the time that child turned 2, I found out about his affair. He didn't even try to hide it. No remorse, no explanation, just another way to show me how little he cared. I felt like a prisoner in my own life. No income, no backup plan, and now betrayal on top of everything else. But the moment everything changed, the moment I stopped surviving and started fighting, was when he turned his rage toward our firstborn. That was the line in the sand. I could take his cruelty toward me, but I'd be damned if I let him hurt our child. So I did the only thing I could do. I kicked him out. That was back in 2012. I wish I could say the nightmare ended there. But, if anything, it was just getting started. After I kicked him out, I thought at least I could finally breathe. But freedom came with a price. With 2 young kids and no income, I found myself cornered. I couldn't afford daycare to return to work, and I had no family around to help. Every day was a battle just to survive. I applied for every form of assistance I could, stretched every dollar, and still went to bed wondering how I was going to make it to the next month. And he didn't give me a single cent. When I asked him for support, not for myself, but for his children, he sneered and said, "The courts haven't ordered me to give you a dime." That was the kind of man I was dealing with. He knew I was struggling and used it as a weapon. No money for diapers, no help with groceries, nothing. And it didn't stop there. He actually went to the bank and lied to them. He froze my accounts. Everything I had access to, gone in a blink. And when I finally filed for default in the divorce proceedings, he lost it. He showed up and physically assaulted me over paperwork. Paperwork. It took months, 6 long months, for the court to finally step in and order him to pay child support and spousal support. The total came out to $2,162 per month. It should have been a relief. But of course he didn't pay it. Not at first. He waited until garnishment was enforced through his job. By that point, he was already $6,000 behind in payments. But that $6,000 wasn't just a number to me. It was leverage. Because of his refusal to comply, I was able to go back to court and get permission to move away. It was my first small victory. A breath of clean air after years of suffocation. Still, I had no idea that this was only the beginning of a much longer and much more brutal legal war. He wasn't done making my life hell, but he had no idea that one day I would turn every weapon he used against me right back on him. After everything I'd been through, getting that court order and moving away felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. I was finally free to rebuild without his shadow hovering over every decision. And for a while, things started to look up. A year after the divorce, I remarried. It wasn't something I rushed into. I just met someone who treated me with kindness, respect, and, most importantly, stability. Now, here's where things get a little technical, but also where my ex made his next big mistake. When I looked over the divorce documents, I noticed a checkbox. It said that spousal support would terminate upon remarriage if it was checked, but it wasn't. That meant, legally, my remarriage didn't void the support payments. I assumed everything was fine. He kept paying, and I let it be. But instead of filing to get my share of his retirement, which I could have done during the divorce, I made a conscious choice. I figured, hey, spousal support was only ordered for 2 years. If I just take that first year of support, we'd call it even. At the time, I estimated that his 401k wouldn't be worth much more than $12,000 anyway. So in my mind, I was making a fair trade. I was trying to be decent. I didn't want more legal battles. I didn't want to bleed him dry. I just wanted peace. And for a while, we had that. I didn't hear much from him. He was still bitter, sure, but at least he wasn't dragging me back to court. I thought, naively, that maybe finally we could exist without war. But as I was about to learn, the only reason there was peace was because he thought he still had the upper hand. And the moment he suspected otherwise, he went right back to playing dirty. In 2017, 5 years after I kicked him out, he struck again, this time from out of nowhere. He filed for sole custody of our kids. No warning, no real basis, just a legal ambush. I was floored. The kids were thriving, we had a stable home, and there hadn't been any incidents. It made no sense until I realized what triggered it. He had just discovered I was remarried. Apparently, he had no idea I'd tied the knot until he started digging through the court records in preparation for his custody claim. And that's when it hit him. He'd paid me spousal support during the first year of my new marriage. From his perspective, I had tricked him into overpaying. In reality, it was his own oversight. That checkbox was blank. Legally, I wasn't. In the wrong. But logic was never his strong suit. Vengeance was. He demanded I repay every penny of that year of spousal support. I tried to reason with him. I reminded him that I had chosen to take that $12,000 instead of filing to split his 401k. I said, "You got the better end of that deal." But he didn't see it that way. Or maybe he just wanted a reason to drag me through the mud again. So I flipped the offer. "If you want that money back, fine. But then I'll file for your retirement." I gave him a choice. He didn't take it. Instead, he pushed forward with the repayment demand and his custody claim. When we got to court, the judge did order me to repay the spousal support. But here's the twist. The judge also increased the child support amount and deducted the repayment from that. In the end, I received about $20 more per month. So technically, I repaid him using his own child support payments. And just like that, the big custody push dropped all bark, no bite. In exchange for 2 extra weeks with the kids during summer, he let the whole thing go. He walked into court expecting to punish me and take control. Instead, he gave me more child support and handed me the perfect legal excuse to go after something I had left untouched for years, his precious 401k. And trust me, that's when things got really fun. I'd tried to be fair. I really had. But after everything, after the abuse, the frozen accounts, the custody ambush, and the bitterness over spousal support, I was done playing nice. He had made his choice. He wanted that $12,000 back? Fine. Then I was going to get what was legally mine. I filed the paperwork to claim my share of his retirement account. He hit the roof. From the very beginning, he fought me on every step. He refused to sign documents, missed deadlines, and deliberately stalled the process in every way he could. What should have taken months dragged on for nearly 4 years. It was exhausting. But this time, I didn't back down. I was older now, stronger, and I'd learned something very important through all our court battles. The system may move slowly, but it does move. Eventually, the courts got fed up with his antics. They sanctioned him for his refusal to cooperate. On top of child support, he was ordered to pay me an additional $600 a month for a full year, just for wasting everyone's time. And then came the final blow. Contempt charges. The court had officially had enough of his games. Finally, in May of 2021, I received the retirement payout. And you know what? It wasn't $12,000 like I originally thought it might be. It wasn't double that either. It was 4 times the amount he'd been so angry about losing. I won't name the exact figure, but let's just say it was enough. To make him very sorry, he pushed me. Had he left well enough alone, had he just taken the deal when I offered it, he would have kept his retirement intact. He would have saved himself from contempt, sanctions, and all the extra payments. But he couldn't help himself. He had to win. He had to punish me. Instead, he lost big, and I won without ever having to lie, cheat, or manipulate. I just let the courts do what he insisted on doing all along, handling things by the book. Just a few months before I got the 401k disbursement, he proposed to his girlfriend. January 2021. I didn't think much of it until she reached out to me directly. Yep, she emailed me and not with congratulations. According to her, it was my fault they couldn't move forward with their wedding plans. She said I had robbed him, stolen his retirement, and destroyed their future. The tone was angry, self-righteous, and completely detached from reality. She genuinely believed I had schemed to take everything from him. And I couldn't help but laugh, because she had no idea how generous I had tried to be. So I laid it all out for her. I explained that I gave him a choice. Let me keep the spousal support, or I'll go after the 401k. I told her he chose the 401k route. He thought he could outmaneuver me again, and he failed. I didn't trick him. I didn't, steal anything. I followed the law. I played fair. And when he escalated, I responded in kind, with paperwork and patience. Then I hit her with the part she really didn't want to hear. If he's that worried about protecting his assets, there's a simple solution. Get a prenup. She didn't like that either. She said she shouldn't have to sign one because I'd already taken enough, because I had made things complicated, because I had ruined the future she wanted. No acknowledgement of his choices, no mention of the years I spent, scraping by while he refused to pay child support. No recognition of the court orders, the contempt charges, or the fact that I had bent over backwards to avoid this outcome in the first place. She was so focused on what I had supposedly done to him, she forgot to ask what he had done to me and to our kids. But I wasn't interested in fighting with her. She was just the latest person he had manipulated with his half-truths and selective memory. What mattered was the record, the court orders, the money that was now legally mine, and the fact that I had finally, looking back, I never wanted things to go this far. I didn't want courtrooms or garnishments or sanctioned payments. I didn't want to weaponize the legal system. I wanted to raise my children in peace. I wanted fairness. I wanted freedom. But he didn't leave me with those options. He forced me to become financially dependent, then mocked me for needing help. He refused to contribute, froze my accounts, and used the court system like a club, swinging it at me any time he thought he might gain the upper hand. Every step of the way, I gave him an out, a chance to settle, a chance to walk away with less damage. But he didn't take it. He thought he could keep pushing, that if he yelled loud enough or dragged me into court often enough, I'd give in, that I'd crumble. What he didn't realize was that every time he escalated, I got stronger. Every insult, every legal threat, every withheld payment, it all sharpened me. It all prepared me for the moment when I finally pushed back, and pushed hard. And when I did, it wasn't out of spite. It wasn't even about revenge. It was about survival. About making sure he never had that kind of power over me, or our children, again. He lost more than just money. He lost time. He lost his chance to move on cleanly. He lost any illusion of control. And maybe most satisfying of all, he lost the ability to rewrite the story. Because now it's out there, plain as day. He tried to steal my kids, so I took his retirement instead. Play stupid games. Win stupid prizes. And now, on to the next story. She dated my son's bully, so I pulled her college funding. I'm the kind of guy who believes in helping family where I can. I work hard, make more than enough to live comfortably, and I've always told my siblings and their kids, if they need something and I can provide it, I will. But I also believe in one unshakable rule. You never turn your back on the people who were there for you during your darkest moments. That rule has guided a lot of my choices in life, especially when it comes to my son, Sean, 18M. Sean is my oldest. He's always been bright and kind and a little quieter than the other kids, but I never thought anything of it. When he was 13, though, everything changed. That's the age when kids start getting a little mean, but what Sean went through wasn't just teasing. It wasn't kids being kids. It was cruel, targeted, and relentless. It started with names, slurs actually, because Sean is gay. That alone was hard for him to navigate, especially in a town where not everyone was as accepting as they like to pretend they are. But the bullying escalated fast. The other boys in his grade, especially one kid named Derek, made Sean's life a living nightmare. They cyberbullied him. They mocked every post he made online, spreading rumors that left him isolated at school. And then came the day I'll never forget. Derek and a few of his friends cornered Sean behind the school gym and beat him so badly that when I saw him at the hospital, I nearly passed out. His face was swollen, bloodied, barely recognizable. The doctors had to keep him. Overnight, I tried everything to get the school to take action. I went to the principal. I called the school board. I even threatened to go to the police. But they dismissed it, said it was roughhousing gone too far. Just boys being boys. That line still makes my blood boil. What they didn't see was the aftermath. My son didn't want to go back to school. For 4 whole months, he couldn't get out of bed without shaking. He was withdrawn, terrified, angry. We had to pull him out and homeschool him for a while. And one night he almost took his own life. That's a sentence no parent ever wants to say. But it's the truth. He was seconds away when my wife walked into his room. I don't like imagining what would have happened if she hadn't. Since then, we've done everything we could to get him help. Therapy, new schools, a fresh start. We moved to a new town just so he'd never have to walk the same hallways where his pain lived. And slowly, bit by bit, Sean started to recover. He's still quiet, but now it's more out of caution than fear. He's learning to be proud of who he is again. He has a small group of friends and even a boyfriend he trusts. He's working toward a future, something I didn't know he'd ever want again. So yeah, I hold a grudge. Not out of spite, out of protection. I saw what that boy went through. I lived it right alongside him, and I told myself that I would never, never let anything threaten his peace again, especially not someone who helped take it away in the first place. Now, here's where things get complicated. My niece, Emily, is my sister's only daughter. She's always been a good kid. Smart, driven, respectful. I've helped her out here and there over the years. Birthday gifts, Christmas surprises, even pitched in for her high school trip abroad last year. She's never given me a reason to doubt her character, and I've always treated her like one of my own. A few months back, she started talking about college. She got accepted into a great school, private, out of state, and expensive as hell. Her mom, my sister, works hard, but doesn't exactly have a college fund tucked away. So when Emily came to me and asked if I could help with tuition, I didn't hesitate. I told her yes. I told her I'd cover the cost for at least her first couple of years, maybe more if she kept her grades up. She was over the moon, hugged me so tight I nearly lost my breath. My sister cried. It was one of those moments where you feel good, like you've done something that'll actually make a difference in someone's life. My wife was on board. Sean was supportive too. He always liked Emily. They were never particularly close. She's younger, and they lived in different cities most of their lives. But there was a quiet fondness there. I think, in a way, Sean saw her as one of the few family members who didn't treat him differently when he came out. She never made weird comments, never acted awkward. She was just normal, like a cousin should be. I'll be honest, saying yes to paying for her college felt like the kind of thing good families do. We all go through stuff, right? So if I've got the means to help someone else climb a little higher, I do it. No strings attached, no guilt trip. Just support. At least that's what I thought until this 4th of July. Every year, we head back to our hometown for the 4th of July. It's tradition. The fireworks, the BBQs, the overcrowded lawn chairs, same thing every summer. We stay at my sister's house, catch up with the rest of the family, let the kids run around like they used to. Even after we moved away, we kept coming back for the sake of family. And this year seemed no different. At first, we got in the day before the holiday and were helping set things up in the backyard. Grill was going, kids were messing around with sparklers, and my wife and I were hauling out the folding tables. Everything was calm, normal. Then Emily walks in, with someone behind her. He was tall, broad-shouldered, short brown hair. There was something about his walk that made the hairs on my neck stand up. And the second I saw his face, my heart stopped. I'd know that face anywhere. The smug grin had been replaced with something more muted, more careful, but it was still him, Derek. I hadn't seen him in years, not since the day Sean came home bleeding and broken. But I remembered. My brain took a snapshot of his face all those years ago, and seeing it now hit me like a punch to the chest. He looked right at me, and I saw the recognition hit him too. His smile faltered. His posture stiffened. He nodded. Politely, then quietly made an excuse to leave. Something about needing to grab something from his car. He didn't come back, and honestly, that told me everything I needed to know. He knew who I was. He knew what he did. And the fact that he couldn't even look me in the eye without bailing, that wasn't the behavior of someone changed. That was guilt. That was shame. After he left, I pulled Emily aside. I kept my voice low but firm. I asked her, what the hell was she thinking bringing that boy here? Bringing him to this house knowing what he did to Sean? Did she really think we'd all just smile and break bread with him? She blinked at me like I'd just spoken another language. She said, Uncle, it happened years ago. He's not like that anymore. He's changed. Like that made it okay. Like Derek had just pushed Sean on the playground or stole his lunch money. I stood there, stunned. Before I could even respond, my sister came over and tried to defuse it. She told Emily it probably wasn't a good idea to bring Derek, especially without warning. But Emily doubled down. She said she had every right to bring her boyfriend to meet the family. Then she said something that made my wife gasp out loud. If Sean's still not over it, that's on him. It's not Derek's fault anymore. I swear the air got sucked out of the backyard in that moment. My wife called her a heartless little bitch, loudly, then turned around and left, grabbing Sean and our other kids without another word. I stayed behind for a few seconds, just looking at Emily, trying to process what I was hearing. That's when I said it. calm, cold. If Derek's changed so much, then he can pay for your college. Then I walked out. We didn't go back to my sister's house after that. My wife had already packed up the essentials and booked a hotel by the time I got to the car. Sean was sitting in the back seat, staring out the window, not saying a word. And that silence? That crushed me more than anything. He didn't cry. He didn't get angry. He just looked hollow, like all the progress we'd made over the last few years was unraveling with one unexpected reunion. The hotel was nice enough, and we tried to make the most of it. Ordered room service, watched some dumb comedy movies, promised the kids we'd hit an amusement park the next day. But I couldn't shake the weight in my chest, not from anger, from betrayal. That night, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. First it was my sister, then her husband, then cousins, even a couple of aunts I barely talked to anymore, all of them chiming in with the same message, that I had gone too far. Emily's just a kid. Derek was a troubled teen, but he's grown. You can't punish a girl's education over something that happened 5 years ago. He's different now. He's not the same boy who hurt Sean. Different. Changed. Redeemed. Funny. How people are so quick to forgive when it's not their child who was bleeding on the sidewalk. When it wasn't their home that felt like a war zone for years because of what one group of boys did. When it wasn't their son lying in a hospital bed, his face barely recognizable, his spirit completely shattered. I ignored every message. Didn't respond to a single one. Not because I didn't have anything to say, but because I knew if I opened my mouth, I might not stop. The kind of rage I felt didn't belong in a group chat. It would have exploded like fireworks, and there would be no coming back from it. The next morning, I got a voicemail from my sister. She sounded calmer, controlled even. Said she didn't agree with what Emily did, but begged me not to ruin her daughter's future. She told me the college deposit was due in 2 weeks and Emily didn't have a backup plan. Then, she said something. That hit me like a slap in the face. She's just in love. You of all people should understand that. That's when I realized something. To them, this wasn't about Sean. It wasn't about what happened. It was about convenience, keeping the peace, maintaining the illusion that everything was okay. And my refusal to play along made me the villain in their story. Not Derek, not Emily, me. For the next few days, I couldn't stop replaying everything in my head. The bruises on Sean's face, his trembling hands when he told us he didn't want to live anymore. The late nights when my wife and I took turns sitting outside his bedroom door, just in case. And now, somehow, I was the bad guy. Because I'd refused to reward someone who knowingly brought Sean's tormentor into our family gathering and then had the nerve to say, if he's not over it, that's his problem. I kept wondering, had I overreacted? Was I really wrong to withdraw my support? To break a promise I made out of love and goodwill because someone shattered that goodwill with a single selfish act? Then I'd look at Sean, at how quiet he'd gotten again, the way he'd stopped laughing at his little sister's jokes, how his posture had gone back to that curled, defensive hunch he used to carry like armor. And I knew the answer. No, I hadn't overreacted. I'd simply reacted. People talk a lot about forgiveness, and I'm not against it. But forgiveness doesn't mean pretending nothing happened. It doesn't mean shaking hands with the boy who damn near broke your son's spirit just because it makes everyone else more comfortable. And it sure as hell doesn't mean funding a future for someone who shows no regard for the trauma she's chosen to invite back into our lives. Let's get something straight. I didn't punish Emily because she's dating someone I don't like. I pulled back because of who she brought, how she brought him, and what she said afterward. There was no apology, no concern for Sean, no attempt to even ask if he was okay. Just, he's changed. Just, it was years ago. Just, get over it. That wasn't love. That was disregard. And if she could disregard what happened. To Sean, if she could look her cousin in the eye and decide the boy who almost drove him to suicide was worth the trade, then she could find someone else to help her through college. Maybe that changed boyfriend of hers would step up. Maybe he'd finally learn what responsibility really looks like. The truth is, I didn't write this to make people pat me on the back. I wrote it because part of me genuinely needed to know, am I the asshole here? I'm a man of my word. I don't break promises unless something shatters the foundation beneath them. And when I made that promise to Emily to pay for her college, it was built on trust, on the belief that she respected my family, that she loved her cousin, that she understood what we'd been through even if she hadn't lived it firsthand. But that illusion crumbled the moment she brought Derek into our space and tried to act. Like his past didn't matter. Like Sean's pain had an expiration date. Like the years we spent putting our son back together were just an inconvenient footnote in her summer romance. And now, the family is divided. My sister says I'm punishing. Her daughter over high school drama. My brother-in-law says it's been too long and I need to let go. A couple of relatives even had the audacity to suggest that Sean must be milking it if he's still hurt after all this time. But I keep coming back to one moment. The day Sean finally smiled again, really smiled, for the first time after the attack. He was sitting at the kitchen table laughing at something stupid on his phone, and for one fragile, beautiful second, he looked like a teenager again. Not a victim, not a shell, just a kid. And I remember thinking, we made it. We got him back. So, no, I won't risk losing that again. Not for a niece who can't see past her boyfriend's fake charm. Not for a family that values appearances over accountability. And not for anyone who dares to minimize what my son went through. I didn't cut Emily off out of cruelty. I did it to protect my child. Because here's the thing. People love to talk about forgiveness when they're not the ones who were hurt. They love to lecture about moving on when they never had to pick up the broken pieces. But until they've stood where I've stood, until they've watched someone they love nearly disappear under the weight of someone else's hate, they don't get to tell me how to parent or how to feel. So, am I the asshole? Maybe to some I am, but to my son, I'm just a father who finally said, enough. And now, on to the next story. Office thief brought down by Frozen's Let It Go. You ever hear about someone getting fired because of Frozen? No, seriously. The song Let It Go didn't just end an office feud, it ended an entire engineering career. This story comes from my dad, and it's about his best friend, my late Uncle Dale. Now, Dale was the kind of guy who took petty revenge and turned it into an art form. But unlike the usual passive-aggressive workplace drama, Uncle Dale had something most office workers don't. A brilliant engineering brain, a team of equally mischievous students, and a deep-seated hatred for corporate freeloaders. This all started around Christmas. And trust me, nothing brings out the worst in people quite like holiday parties, free food, and a donation box that mysteriously keeps coming up empty. Uncle Dale wasn't about to let that slide, especially not with someone like Brad around. You'll meet Brad soon. Let's just say, if you've ever worked with someone who got their job through family connections and made everyone miserable, you already know the type. So yeah, it starts with a party fund, a tin box, and a sneaky thief, but it ends with glitter, rage, and Idina Menzel screaming, "Let it go," while someone tries to punch a donation box into silence. And no, I'm not exaggerating. Let me walk you through what happened, and why Uncle Dale is still a legend at that company, even years after he's gone. Uncle Dale was what you'd call a lifer, a senior engineer at a small but mighty firm in the Midwest. He'd been there forever, the kind of guy who knew where every wire ran, which in turn would survive past probation, and exactly how much cake you needed for a company party of 45. But his influence didn't stop at the office. Dale also taught part-time at the local community college, mentoring young engineering students. Some of those kids still tell stories about him, not just because he was brilliant, but because he was hilariously unorthodox. Extra credit? Only if you solve a real-world problem with flair. Late assignment? Better come with an apology and donuts. At the office, he had two unofficial titles, the Fixer and Party Czar. That second one might sound silly, but trust me, Dale took holiday parties very seriously. Every year, he'd coordinate the Christmas celebration down to the last detail, and to help fund it, he kept a little locked tin box outside his office. No one was required to contribute, but most people did. A few bucks here and there for decorations, drinks, or prizes for the White Elephant Exchange. That box? It had been a tradition for years. People respected it. Dropping your cash in that slot meant you were part of the team. It meant you cared. So when December rolled around and Dale went to check the funds and found nothing but air, he didn't get mad. He got calculating. Because Uncle Dale knew what everyone knew. People had been donating. He'd seen them do it, which could only mean one thing. Someone was stealing from the party fund. And that, my friend, is when the real fun began. At first, Uncle Dale tried to stay logical. Maybe someone had taken the money out early to buy supplies. Maybe the box had been moved. Maybe a well-meaning intern just forgot to tell him. But the more he asked around, the clearer it became. No one knew anything. And worse, people had seen others dropping in bills. $10 here, 20 there, even a few. Generous souls who'd tossed in 50s. Yet the total inside the box was zero, zilch, nada. That's when Dale's gears really started turning. Someone was stealing, and it wasn't just theft, it was personal. This was a breach of something sacred. You don't mess with engineers. Party funds. You just don't. And then Brad walked around the corner. Brad. Even just saying his name out loud makes people groan. He was the owner's nephew, which basically meant he had immunity from everything short of murder. Incompetent? Check. Condescending? Double check. Entitled beyond reason? Oh, you have no idea. Brad was one of those guys who never got told no growing up. And by the time he landed at the firm, he'd mastered the art of doing just enough to avoid getting fired, while making everyone else's life miserable. He'd interrupt meetings, talk over senior staff, and once referred to a female engineer as sweetheart during a presentation. Spoiler alert, that didn't go over well. So when Brad strolled past the donation box with that smug little half smile, like he knew something nobody else did, Dale's instincts kicked in. There was no proof, but something about Brad's timing, his expression, his complete lack of interest in the party he'd still show up to and mooch off of. That's when Uncle Dale knew. Brad wasn't just an office nuisance. Brad was the Grinch. Who stole Christmas? And now, it was time to catch him in the act. Now most people would have marched straight into HR, or maybe cornered Brad with a few passive-aggressive jabs in the break room. But Uncle Dale wasn't most people. He was an engineer, and engineers don't accuse, they prove. So he started planning. First step, surveillance. He grabbed one of those doorbell cameras, the kind with motion detection and automatic cloud storage, and mounted it discreetly just above the donation box. He angled it perfectly so it wouldn't raise any suspicion, and then waited for the weekend to end. Monday morning, the office returned to its usual chaos. But Dale wasn't done yet. Oh no, he wanted bait. So he asked a coworker, loud enough for others to hear, to casually say, "Hey Dale, I dropped $100 in the party box. Hope it helps." It was a setup, of course. The box was still empty. Then he waited. 2 days later, he got a notification on his phone. Motion detected. He clicked the video, and there it was. Brad, looking around like a cartoon villain, opened the box, saw it was empty, and, get this, threw it against the wall in frustration, like a toddler who didn't find candy in a piñata. That was all the confirmation Dale needed. Brad had been counting on that money, which meant he'd been stealing it all along. At this point, Dale could have gone straight to the boss, presented the footage, demanded justice. But where's the fun in that? No. Uncle Dale had a better idea. One that would involve his students, some minor musical torture, and a box that would become the stuff of legend. Uncle Dale wasn't someone who rushed to tattle. It wasn't out of fear. He had job security, tenure, and the loyalty of half the office. It was more about the principle of it all. Because if you're going to stop a thief like Brad, someone who got away with everything just by flashing a last name, you don't just stop him. You humiliate him. You make it memorable. You make it stick. And so Dale did what any deviously brilliant engineer would do. He turned it into a challenge. He walked into class that week with a sparkle in his eye and said, "All right, folks, extra. Credit opportunity. I need you to design me a rig, a very specific kind. Think decoy donation box. Your job is to make it as annoying as possible when someone opens it. The more obnoxious, the more points." Naturally, the students perked. Up. Extra credit for chaos? Say no more. They started brainstorming like mad scientists. Someone suggested glitter bombs. Someone else pitched compressed air bursts. But the idea that made Dale laugh the hardest, and therefore got the green light, came from a shy sophomore in the back row. She raised her hand and said, "What if it played Let It Go?" You could hear the silence in the room as everyone processed the horror of that song. It had once been beloved. Now, it was the anthem of parents slowly losing their sanity and coworkers on the edge of snapping. It was perfect. Dale approved it on the spot. Bonus credit to anyone who could make it loud and unescapable. The students got to work, armed with nothing but spare parts, musical greeting cards, and a dangerous amount of creativity. 1 week later, the trap was ready, and Brad was about to meet his match in the form of Idina Menzel. The students didn't just meet the challenge, they engineered it into a masterpiece of public humiliation. First, they cracked open a few musical greeting cards to extract the sound module, the kind that starts playing a song when you open it. Then, they amplified the speaker using a plastic chamber to act like a mini sound cone, maxing out the volume. But the real genius? They rewired the thing so that it wouldn't stop playing once activated. Normally, those modules only play a short clip. Not this one. This one played Let It Go in full, on loop. And just to add frosting to the chaos cake, they glued the module deep inside the tin box using industrial-strength epoxy. No ripping it out unless you had a blowtorch and a death wish. Then came the locking mechanism. The hinge was rigged to click open easily, but closing it again? You'd need to press a secret button hidden along the side of the box. Without that, it wouldn't latch, and the song would just keep on blaring. The final step was a fresh coat of paint and a convincing label. Holiday Party Fund. Thank ye. You! Dale took one look, smiled like a kid on Christmas morning, and said, I love it. We're going live. The next day, he placed the rigged box on the table outside his office, exactly where the original had been. Then, for added bait, he made a little show of pulling out his wallet in front of a few co-workers and saying, Well, would you look at that? Someone already dropped in $50. What a generous bunch. Then he stepped back into his office, phone camera app open, and waited. It didn't take long. Barely an hour later, Dale's phone pinged. Motion detected. He opened the live feed, and there he was. Brad, scanning the hallway, glancing side to side like a budget Bond villain. He approached the donation box, hands twitching like he was about to perform open-heart surgery. Then, with the confidence of someone who'd done this before, he popped the lid open. Let it go! Let it go! The hallway erupted in song. Loud, echoing, absolutely inescapable. Brad flinched like he'd touched an electric fence. He immediately slammed the box shut, or tried to. But it wouldn't close. He pressed harder. Still wouldn't budge. So, now he's there, red-faced, furiously wrestling a tin box while Idina Menzel belts out one of the most overplayed songs in modern history. He looked around, panicked, tried yanking the lid shut, tried flipping the box upside down, even tried covering it with his jacket. Nothing worked. The noise was drawing attention. First, a few heads popped out of cubicles. Then a couple of interns wandered into the hallway. Soon, half the floor was watching Brad fight for his dignity against a children's movie anthem. And that's when his uncle, the owner of the company, stepped out of his office. You could hear the whole floor go quiet, except, of course, for, Let it go! Can't hold it back anymore! Brad froze. His uncle took one look at the donation box, now dented from all the struggling, and raised an eyebrow. Then slowly he said, Brad, my office. Now. And just like that, Brad picked up the cursed box, still singing, and walked the slowest walk of shame in corporate history. 15 minutes later, Brad came out of his uncle's office carrying a cardboard box. Not the donation box, a real one. The kind with all your stuff in it. His desk was already being cleared out. A few awkward co-workers looked away. Others watched with barely hidden satisfaction. Nobody said a word. Uncle Dale, of course, stayed in his office. He didn't need to gloat. He already knew what was in Brad's file now. Do not rehire. Do not recommend. Brad packed up his things, walked straight out the front door, and never set foot in that office again. The donation box, by the way. Still singing, even after Brad had hurled it at the wall one last time, hard enough to leave a dent. But that thing was built like a tank. Idina Menzel didn't even skip a beat. And the best part? Uncle Dale didn't stop there. Oh no. He saved everything, because remember the camera? It caught all of it. Brad sneaking in, popping the box, panicking, trying to smother the music, and finally storming off like a defeated cartoon villain. Which brings us to the Christmas party. The company Christmas party that year? Legendary decorations, catered food, drinks. But the highlight wasn't the gift exchange or even the spiked eggnog. It was when Uncle Dale dimmed the lights, wheeled out a projector, and said, Before we start the raffle, I have a little video to share. The screen flickered on, and there it was, Brad, in full 1080p opening the box. And then, cue music. Let it go, let it go. The timing was perfect. The video played just as the music swelled, synced like a music video. You saw Brad's face twist in confusion, then panic. You saw the box refusing to close, his frantic attempts to smother it, and finally, the exact moment his uncle appeared behind him. The room howled with laughter. Even the CEO, Brad's own uncle, couldn't help but chuckle. That's what he gets, someone muttered near the buffet. Finally! By the time the video ended, the applause was thunderous. Someone started a slow clap. One of the interns wiped away tears. And Dale? He just sat there with a satisfied smile, sipping cider like a man who had engineered not just a trap, but justice. It wasn't just about catching a thief. It was about sending a message. Don't mess with the party fund. And definitely don't mess with an engineer who knows. How to wire a sound module. Uncle Dale passed away a few years ago. But this story lives on, retold at family gatherings, company parties, and every time someone asks, "What's the best petty revenge you've ever seen?" To his students, he was a mentor. To his coworkers, a hero. To Brad, probably a recurring nightmare. And honestly, I think that's exactly how Dale would have wanted it, because he didn't just love solving problems, he loved teaching lessons. He didn't believe in yelling or fighting or filing HR reports. No, he believed in something far more powerful, a well-executed trap and the unstoppable force of a Disney soundtrack. That donation box, it's still around. Someone found it in the storage room years later, still glued shut, still dented, still faintly humming when you shake it. A little office relic that says, "Don't mess with tradition, and don't ever steal from the holiday fund. Rest in peace, Uncle Dale. You truly let it go, and made sure Brad never could." And now, on to the next story. Local scam gone global. They messed with the wrong American. You never expect something minor, like an outdated inspection sticker, to spiral into an international incident, especially involving corrupt local cops. But that's exactly what happened to me when I was stationed overseas with the U.S. military. I learned firsthand just how quickly a petty local scam could blow up into a major international mess. The area where I was stationed wasn't exactly prosperous. Poverty was widespread, petty crime was common, and local authorities weren't above bending rules for profit. It seemed like every corner had its own scheme, and the locals had become experts at exploiting loopholes in the system, often with the police's silent endorsement. What began as a minor inconvenience quickly turned into a crisis when these corrupt local cops chose the wrong target, me. Little did they know, their usual victim wasn't supposed to be someone connected directly to the United States government, and when they took my family's passports, things escalated beyond their wildest imagination. It all started with a shady, little racket that was apparently totally normal where I was stationed. Here's how it worked. The local police had a system where they incentivized people, panhandlers, petty thieves, or just about anyone with too much time and too little conscience, to report vehicles with expired or fake inspection stickers. These informants were even given access to the inspection database, and some were known to abuse that access. They'd either spot what they thought was a fake sticker, or more often just pick a random target, break into the vehicle, clean it out, and leave a helpful little note saying the items were turned in to the local police station. The car owner would have to show up in person, pay a fine for the supposedly expired sticker, and then be given a strict deadline to fix the inspection or face additional penalties. And yeah, this wasn't a rare thing. It was so well known among foreigners and expats that one of the first things they told you when in processing on base, especially if you drove a motorcycle, was to never leave your inspection sticker on the actual bike. If you did, it'd be peeled off within a day. You were told to keep it in your wallet instead. This wasn't just some fringe thing happening in dark alleys. This was a semi-official racket, enabled by the very people who were supposed to be upholding the law. Everyone in the area seemed to have accepted it as part of life. Until, of course, they messed with someone who wasn't going to roll over quietly, and that someone happened to be me. That day started like any other, until it didn't. I walked out to my car in the morning, already running late for work, and saw something that made my stomach drop. A folded slip of paper sitting on the driver's seat. My heart sank further when I saw my glove box hanging open. The note, written in stiff English, claimed that my car had a fake inspection sticker and that all of my belongings had been turned over to the local police station. To make matters worse, I wasn't the only one affected. My daughter was with me, backpack in hand, ready for school. There was no school bus for her. We relied on my car every single morning, so not only was I going to be late for work, now she was going to be late for school too. And let me be very clear, my inspection sticker was completely valid, up to date, no tampering. So what the hell were they even talking about? Then I remembered what was inside the glove box. That's when the panic really hit. The night before, I had put our passports, mine, my wife's, and my kids, into the glove box. I needed them for some paperwork we were planning to do at the base. My wife's passport was expired, and we had plans to update her application. Knowing how forgetful I can be, I'd prepped everything the night before, made sure the car was locked, and told myself I'd grab them first thing in the morning. That mistake haunted me instantly. The idea that some low-level informant or, worse, a dirty cop, was now in possession of 3 U.S. passports made me feel physically sick. I didn't know what kind of trouble that could cause, but I knew I had to get them back immediately, so I dropped everything and drove straight to the police station. The ride to the station was a blur. My brain kept racing through worst-case scenarios. I had no idea what the local laws were when it came to stolen foreign passports, or if the people involved even realized the value of what they'd taken. All I knew was that I needed those documents back, fast. If they were lost, it could spiral into a bureaucratic nightmare. If they were misused, it could be something even worse. When I walked into the station, I tried to stay calm. I explained what had happened and asked why my vehicle had been flagged when my inspection sticker was valid. One of the officers, who barely looked up from his desk, said it was likely a mistake, and that it happens sometimes. He pulled out a plastic bin filled with miscellaneous items and gestured toward it. "Your belongings are there," he muttered, began sifting through the contents. There was my phone charger, some pens, my kid's school folder, a bunch of glove box junk. But only 2 passports. My wife's passport was missing. I turned back to the officer and said flatly, "One of the passports is gone." He just shrugged. "Whatever is there is what was turned in." "No," I told him. "I need a police report. A passport was stolen and I have to report it to the U.S. Embassy. That's an official document and this police station knows who took it, because they dropped everything off this morning." That was the moment the officer's entire demeanor changed. His eyes shot up. His tone shifted from dismissive to cautious. He tried to talk me out of it, saying there was no need to escalate things. I stood firm. I wasn't asking. I was making it very clear that this was no longer a missing wallet or a glove box break-in. This was a case of stolen international identification, and now it was on record. The more I insisted on filing the police report, the more visibly uncomfortable the officer became. He started backtracking, suddenly claiming that maybe the missing passport was still in the evidence room and they just missed it. But it was too late for backpedaling. I had already made it clear that I was contacting the U.S. Embassy either way. "You understand this is a serious issue, right?" I said. "This isn't a missing receipt. This is a stolen federal document. I need a report and I need names." He froze for a second, clearly calculating what to do next. Then he got up without a word and left the room. When he returned, he had another officer with him, someone clearly more senior. This second cop tried to smooth things over, telling me the department would look into it internally and make things right if anything had gone wrong. I didn't budge. "I'm filing the report, and I'm notifying the embassy. If you won't help, I'll note that in my statement too." At that point, they reluctantly allowed me to fill out the paperwork. They didn't offer a copy, but I demanded one. I got it stamped, took photos of it with my phone, and emailed it to the embassy the moment I stepped outside. It was out of their hands now, and into the hands of someone with far more authority than a crooked local cop. By the time I made it back to base, the embassy had already responded. They didn't treat this like a routine report. They were immediately interested in the police station, the time of the theft, and whether I had the name of the person who turned in the passports. I gave them everything. Scanned the police report, described the officer's behavior, and even attached a photo of the note left in my car. Within an hour, a consular officer called me directly. She confirmed what I'd suspected. Stealing or mishandling U.S. passports, even abroad, is a serious offense. The fact that they'd been in the possession of someone operating in concert with local law enforcement made it worse. If the passport was misused, or even just improperly handled, it could trigger international consequences. I didn't have to wait long to find out what happened next. Within a few days, word made its way back to me, unofficially, of course. The man who broke into my car was arrested. The same guy who probably thought he was untouchable because he worked hand in hand with the cops was now facing actual legal charges. Apparently, the embassy had applied pressure through the appropriate diplomatic channels, and the local authorities didn't want that kind of spotlight on their little operation. What sealed his fate wasn't just the break-in or even the stolen items, it was the passport. Tampering with foreign identification documents, especially American ones, had crossed a line that their usual game didn't account for. I wasn't there when they arrested him, but I wish I could have seen the look on his face when the same cops who probably used to pay him turned up at his door with handcuffs. The fallout was swift and brutal, at least by the standards of the quiet, back-alley corruption that had been thriving unchecked. The guy who broke into my car wasn't just slapped on the wrist. From what I gathered, he was fined, charged, and possibly facing additional legal trouble for being in possession of stolen international documents. No one said it outright, but it was pretty clear that the police department wanted this problem to disappear quietly. They couldn't afford to let it spiral into a larger scandal with American authorities involved. And the best part? The embassy reissued my wife's passport for free. They didn't even hesitate. In their words, "You did the right thing reporting it." They thanked me for the documentation, especially the police report and the photo evidence, and assured me they were handling it from there. It felt good. Not in a vengeful way, but in a righteous way. For once, a scam artist and a corrupt system didn't win. Someone actually had to face the consequences of treating law-abiding people like easy targets. That feeling of helplessness when I first saw the note in my car, it was gone, replaced by something much better. The knowledge that standing your ground and doing the right thing, even in a foreign country, can actually make a difference. After that, everything went back to normal. Well, mostly. I didn't have any more. Run-ins with shady sticker enforcement, no mysterious notes on my windshield, no random break-ins. It's like word got around that I wasn't the kind of target they wanted to mess with again. More importantly, I left with a sense of closure. Not just because my family's documents were restored or that the embassy had my back, but because someone who thought they were above the law actually got held accountable. Some people online later criticized me. Said I went out of my way to get someone in serious trouble over a minor offense. But here's the thing. Breaking into someone's locked car, stealing passports, and playing games with people's safety and identity, that's not minor. That's not just a scam, that's personal. I don't feel bad at all. Not even a little. If anything, I hope that guy learned something from it. Maybe next time he'll think twice before trying to shake down the wrong person. Maybe he'll remember what it felt like when the system he thought was protecting him suddenly turned on him instead. And as for me, I finished my time overseas without another issue. A few months later, I PCS'd home, passport renewed, lesson learned, and with one hell of a story to tell. And now, on to the next story. He gave away a piece of my past. Now he's losing his future. I was only 5 years old when my Nana handed me a wrapped bundle with the most delicate hands I had ever seen. Inside was her bone china tea set, white porcelain with tiny pink flowers hand-painted around the rims, gold trim on the edges, and the faintest scent of lavender clinging to the box from her linen closet. I didn't understand its full weight at the time, but Nana made sure I knew it was special. It had been passed down from her own mother, and now, because I was her only granddaughter out of 11 grandchildren, it was mine. That tea set became the centerpiece of my childhood memories. I wasn't the kind of kid who had fancy toys or shiny new gadgets. But with that tea set, I felt like royalty. My Nana would host proper tea parties for just the two of us. Crustless cucumber sandwiches, fresh scones, strawberry jam, and strong tea that she'd water down just enough for me to sip. We'd dress up, wear silly hats, and use real napkins folded like swans. It wasn't just playtime. It was our tradition. Even as I grew older, I never stopped cherishing it. I kept it spotless, stored carefully in a glass front cabinet in my kitchen. Anytime I had little girls visiting, I'd bring it out to keep the tradition alive. I'd make mini sandwiches and bake little cakes just like Nana did. It became a way to share joy, one that I imagined I'd one day pass on to my own daughter or granddaughter. My husband knew this. He saw how much it meant to me, saw the way my face lit up when I brought it out, how I'd treat it like a sacred artifact. I talked to him about Nana a lot. He knew I lost her years ago, and that the tea set was one of the last tangible things I had of her. It wasn't just porcelain. It was a connection to every warm memory I had of being loved, listened to, and valued. So when my sister-in-law and her family came to stay with us for a week, I was excited to set up another tea party. Her daughter was 6 and full of energy. I thought it would be lovely to show her how magical tea time could be. My sister-in-law even joined in, and for an afternoon we all sat laughing around my old wooden table, sipping out of china cups I had used since I was a little girl. At the time, I thought it was one of those beautiful, full-circle moments. But I had no idea that tea party would be the last time I'd ever use my Nana's set as freely as I had for almost 30 years. A couple of weeks after that family visit, one of my closest friends was bringing her 2 daughters over for the weekend. Naturally, I planned a tea party. It had become something of a signature move by now, an offering of warmth, whimsy, and a little slice of tradition I could share. That morning I got up early, just like Nana used to, and started baking. I made cucumber and egg salad sandwiches, lemon scones, and a small chocolate cake. The whole house smelled like a bakery. With the food cooling and the girls on their way, I went to retrieve the tea set from the cabinet where I always kept it, and it wasn't there. At first, I thought maybe I'd misplaced it after the last tea party. I checked the dining room shelves, then the sideboard drawers. Nothing. I started to feel a tightness in my chest, a kind of creeping panic I hadn't felt in years. I tore through every cabinet, every drawer in the kitchen, even the garage and basement in case I'd done something truly absent-minded. Still nothing. I was frantic by the time my guests arrived, but I forced a smile and brought out some mismatched mugs instead. I made it work, but I was dying inside. I couldn't focus on the conversation or the laughter. All I could think about was where it had gone and why. That evening, I kept searching. My husband, noticing my distress, stepped in. He watched me ransack the house and joined the act. He looked under beds, opened closets, and calmly repeated, "It couldn't have just walked away." I remember nodding numbly, clinging to the hope that maybe I really had misplaced it. Maybe I was just tired or overwhelmed, but something about his voice, his calm, his insistence, didn't sit right. I didn't have proof yet, but something in my gut told me he was lying, that he knew more than he was saying. Still, I had no evidence. And without that, I couldn't say what I was starting to suspect. A few days later, he came home with a box under his arm and said, "Look, I found something that might help." I opened it to find a set of cheap, flimsy china, probably from Walmart or some discount store. It looked nothing like mine. The cups were too light, the design generic and printed on, not painted. No memory, no care, no soul. Just ceramic pretending. To be something meaningful? I didn't even hesitate. I threw the whole box in the trash. He looked shocked, called me ungrateful. Maybe I was. But I wasn't ungrateful because the set wasn't expensive. I was ungrateful because it was an insult. You don't replace 28 years of love and legacy with a $20 knockoff and expect that to heal the wound. That was the moment I realized he didn't get it, or worse, he didn't care. Days turned into weeks, and the ache in my chest only grew deeper. Every time I walked past the kitchen cabinet, it was like a ghost tugged at me. Something that had been a fixture of my life, something that had followed me through childhood, college, marriage, was just gone. And the worst part? My husband acted like it was no big deal. He'd stopped helping me look. Instead, he started minimizing, telling me that maybe I'd loaned it to someone, that I probably packed it away for safekeeping and forgot. Then he'd switch tactics, patting my hand and saying, "Hey, maybe it's time to let it go. It's just stuff." But it wasn't just stuff. It was the last connection to a woman who raised me with love and tenderness when the rest of the world felt cold. It was the centerpiece of my happiest memories. You don't just forget where you put something like that. You don't just move on. I started spiraling, questioning myself. Was I losing it? Was grief clouding my memory that badly? But every time I tried to believe I'd misplaced it, something tugged at me, a quiet, persistent voice in the back of my mind whispering, "You didn't lose it. Someone took it." And eventually, that whisper got louder, sharper. I began to replay the last time I'd seen it, during that tea party with my niece. I remembered her looking at the set with awe, asking questions about the little saucers and doilies. I remembered how my sister-in-law had commented on how vintage it was, and how her daughter had begged her to let her have a set like this. That's when something clicked. Suddenly, everything else started to make sense. My husband's weird calmness, his pushy attempts to replace it. The subtle gaslighting. He had done it. He had taken it. I didn't know how or when, but I knew in my bones he was the one. Then one evening, while I was in the other room folding laundry, I heard his voice. He was on the phone with someone. His tone was casual, but his words weren't meant for me. He said, "Just make sure to put it away when we visit, and tell Melly not to mention anything about it. She's still upset." He didn't say, "Tea set." He didn't have to. My blood went cold. I stood frozen in the hallway, gripping a pair of socks in my hands, listening to the final shred of trust unravel in real time. When I walked into the room and locked eyes with him, he froze like a deer caught in headlights. I asked him directly, "Where is it?" He fumbled, trying to hang up, sputtering excuses. And I didn't wait. I called him a thief, not in anger. In truth, he didn't even deny it. Not really. After I called him a thief, he just sat there staring at me with that stupid frozen expression on his face. Then he stammered out some nonsense about how he meant to talk to me about it, how his niece loved it so much. and how it was really a toy for little girls anyway. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. A toy? This wasn't a plastic tea set from a garage sale. This was a family heirloom, a legacy, a memory-made porcelain, and he gave it away like it was nothing. Asked him if his sister even knew it was mine. Did he lie to her too? Or did they both just assume I'd never notice? Like I wasn't allowed to care? He didn't answer. Instead, he tried to reason with me, told me I was too old to be playing Tea Party, said I needed to grow up, that this kind of thing was for children, and that he was going to talk to me about leaving it to her anyway. Like that made it better, like that made it his decision. At that point, it wasn't even about the tea set anymore. It was about what it represented, how easily he could disregard something sacred to me, how comfortable he was lying to my face, how effortlessly he decided my emotions didn't matter, that I was immature for caring, that my grief, my joy, my family's history was silly. And when I didn't accept his gaslighting, when I stood firm and told him to get it back, he acted like I was the unreasonable one. Then his sister called. Her voice was smug, defensive, like she'd done me a favor. She tried to justify it, said her daughter treasured it, and that I was overreacting, that I could afford to let it go. I didn't scream. I didn't argue. I just said, calmly and clearly, return it in the same condition you took it, or I'm calling the police. And then I hung up. It wasn't an idle threat. I meant it, and for the first time, I saw the fear in my husband's eyes, not because he was sorry, but because I was serious. He tried to walk it back, apologized half-heartedly, saying we could work this out. But his words were hollow. I had seen who he really was, someone who would take from me, lie about it, dismiss my feelings, and only grovel when the consequences became real, and I wasn't playing pretend anymore. The next morning, I kept my promise. I went straight to the police station and filed a report. I brought a photo of the tea set, a picture I had taken years ago during one of my tea parties with a friend's daughter. I explained it had been stolen from my home, that it was a family heirloom passed down through generations, and that I knew exactly who had it. The officer was calm and polite, but I could see the skepticism in his eyes. What I was describing wasn't some flat-screen TV or a stolen car. To him, it was a few cups and saucers, just dishes. But I made sure he understood what it represented, and to my surprise, he took the report seriously. I didn't stop there. I called my brother, who lived in the same city as my husband's sister. I explained everything. He didn't ask questions. He just said, send me her address. Within hours, my brother had driven across town, walked up to their house and knocked on the door. I don't know what he said. I don't even care. But he came back with my tea set, wrapped in towels and packed inside a box, every single piece intact. Sat on the kitchen floor and cried as I unpacked it, each plate, each cup, each delicate saucer. Still mine, still whole. And that's when the phone calls started. My husband was furious. He called me names I won't even repeat here. Accused me of being dramatic, of embarrassing him, of dragging the family into something petty. He said I'd overreacted, made it a federal case over some dishes. But he wasn't yelling because he was hurt. He was yelling because he'd lost. Because I didn't roll over and let him rewrite the story. Because I didn't let him decide what was worth valuing. Because I stood up for something that mattered to me, and that to him was the ultimate insult. I realized then that the man I'd married didn't respect me. He didn't see me as a partner. He saw me as someone to manage, to manipulate, and that realization hurt more than losing the tea set ever could. After I got the tea set back, I didn't even put it back in the kitchen. I wrapped it up in soft towels and packed it away in a box, far from anywhere my husband could reach. For the first time since the entire ordeal began, I felt some kind of peace, not because things were fixed, far from it, but because I had reclaimed something that was mine. Not just the tea set, my dignity. My husband didn't stop sulking. He shifted tactics, again. First it was rage, then guilt. Now he was in groveling mode. The same man who called me names 2 days earlier was suddenly soft-spoken, apologetic, saying things like, I didn't realize how important it was to you, and we can get past this. But I couldn't get past it, because I didn't just lose some china. I lost my trust in him. I lost the comfort of believing I was married to someone who respected me, and the longer I sat with that realization, the more it burned. So I began packing. I started with the most important things. Letters from my Nana, photos, books, jewelry, keepsakes, anything I didn't want to risk losing again. I didn't tell him at first. I waited until he came home and saw the suitcases by the door. He looked stunned, hurt even, but not surprised. He asked, "You're really leaving? Over this?" And I said, "No, I'm leaving because you stole from me, lied to me, gaslighted me, then tried to guilt me when I stood up for myself." He told me I was throwing everything away over something stupid, but it wasn't stupid. What's stupid is staying married to someone who thinks betrayal is negotiable. What's stupid is letting a man diminish the parts of you that matter until you start questioning if they were ever worth defending in the first place. I wasn't about to let that happen. When I told him I was leaving, he followed me around the house like a lost dog, suddenly trying to remember every good thing we'd ever shared. He reminded me of our wedding, our vacations, the times we laughed in the kitchen late at night. But none of it mattered anymore. Not after what he'd done. Not after I saw the truth behind the mask he wore so easily. He tried to guilt me into staying. Said I was blowing things out of proportion, that couples fight, that we'd get past this just like we had other disagreements, but stealing from your partner, hiding it, lying about it, then turning it into their problem when they catch you, that's not a disagreement. That's a character flaw, and I wasn't about to live the rest of my life doubting the man sleeping next to me. I told him 2 of my brothers were coming the next day to help me move, and I meant it. I wasn't bluffing, and I think that's when it finally hit him. That this wasn't a phase. That I wasn't crying for sympathy or looking for him to win me back. I was done. He spent the rest of the night sulking in the bedroom while I kept packing. In the quiet, I started thinking about all the other little moments I'd overlooked before. The times he'd dismissed my feelings, made jokes at my expense, subtly chipped away at things I loved because he didn't value them. It all started adding up. The tea set wasn't the beginning. It was just the line he finally crossed. I looked around our house, my house, if I'm honest, since I'd bought it before we married, and made a mental checklist of what mattered, what I was taking with me, what I could live without, and what I'd never let anyone take from me again. The morning my brothers arrived, I felt calm, steadier than I had in weeks. We loaded up the boxes, one by one, while my husband watched from the doorway, saying almost nothing. Whatever words he might have had left, he kept to himself. Maybe he finally understood that an apology without change is just manipulation. Or maybe he didn't care anymore. I honestly don't know, and I don't need to. Before I left, I took one last walk through the house. I didn't cry. I wasn't angry. I was just finished. I took everything that meant anything to me, because I knew if I left it there, I might never see it again. We'll fight over the rest in court. But I made sure that what couldn't be replaced was already safe in my hands. Since then, people have asked me if I really left my husband over a tea set, and every time I tell them the same thing. No, I left him because he stole from me and pretended. He didn't, because he looked me in the eyes and made me feel crazy for mourning something sacred. Because when I caught him, he called me immature. Because instead of protecting something I cherished, he dismissed it as just stuff. Because he showed me in no uncertain terms that what matters to me means nothing to him. The tea set was just the catalyst. What it really came down to was this: I will not spend my life with someone who makes me feel small, who chips away at my worth, who believes they have the right to decide which pieces of my heart are worth preserving. So no, this wasn't just about China. It was about memory, about legacy, about trust, and most of all, it was about finally choosing myself. And now, on to the next story. My sister called me a sinner, so I revealed her darkest secret. I never planned on starting a family this soon. I'm only 20, and even though my boyfriend is 27, we weren't exactly trying for a baby. But when that test came back positive, I wasn't scared. I was surprised, yes. But deep down, I felt ready, or at least ready enough to try. My boyfriend was supportive from the moment I told him. He smiled, pulled me in close, and said, "We've got this." That was all I needed to hear. So we decided to share the news with our families. Nothing huge, just a small dinner, home-cooked meal, and a chance to show them we were ready to face this next chapter head-on. I was nervous, of course. 20 and pregnant doesn't exactly scream perfect timing to most people, especially in my family, but I held on to hope. Maybe they'd see what I saw. A new beginning, a happy accident, and for the most part, they did. My mom gasped and then cried, happy tears. My dad cracked a joke about becoming a cool grandpa, and even my aunt smiled, offering soft congratulations over wine and roast chicken. For a moment, I felt safe, like maybe this pregnancy wouldn't be a scandal. Maybe it could just be joy. But that's when she walked in, my sister. My perfect, polished, devout older sister, 29, painfully righteous, and twice as judgmental as anyone I've ever met. She didn't hug me, didn't smile, didn't say congrats or ask how I was feeling. She just stared, and then with a voice calm as a sermon and sharp as a dagger, she said, "Wow, pregnant? Out of wedlock? I expected better." I tried to laugh it off, tried to change the subject, but she didn't stop, not even close. Once she started, there was no stopping her. My sister launched into a full-blown lecture, right there at the dinner table, like she was giving a sermon and I was her only audience. She didn't yell, she never does, but her tone, it was heavy, deliberate, laced with disappointment. "God is watching," she said. "You've invited shame into your life, into our family." My mom tried to step in, gently reminding her it wasn't the time or place. But my sister waved her off like she was just background noise. "This isn't about comfort," she snapped. "It's about truth, and truth comes before feelings." I stared at her, stunned. My fork was frozen, halfway to my mouth. And I swear the room had gone dead silent except for her voice. It was like watching someone perform a monologue she'd been rehearsing for years, quoting scripture, ranting about morality, accusing me of disrespecting the values our family was raised with. Never mind that I'd never seen her quote those values when it came to herself. What made it worse was how calm she was. She wasn't crying, she wasn't angry, she was smug, righteous, her chin tilted high like a judge handing down a sentence. She didn't care that I was shaking. She didn't care that everyone was uncomfortable. She just kept going. And that's when I felt something inside me shift. I was done sitting there while she condemned me like she was above reproach. Done letting her wield religion like a weapon, while hiding behind a fake smile. She wanted to drag my name through the mud in front of our family? Fine. I had a shovel, too. I opened my mouth, not even sure what I was going to say. My heart was pounding, my cheeks were burning, and every instinct told me to just hold it in, let it pass, be the bigger person. But then I looked at her, my sister, so self-righteous, so cruel in her calmness, and I remembered something. I remembered the secret, the one she made me swear never to tell. A few years ago, we had a moment, a rare one. She had come to me in tears, shaking, terrified. She had gotten pregnant. She was with a guy she wasn't supposed to be seeing, someone from work, I think, but she never gave a name. She wasn't married, wasn't even dating him. Seriously. She cried for hours that night, told me she couldn't have the baby, told me no one could ever know, said it would destroy her reputation, her ministry, her standing at church. She begged me to drive her to the clinic 2 towns over. I did. I held her hand. I didn't judge her. I didn't say a word. I was her sister. And now she had the nerve to sit across from me and call me a disgrace? That was it. I straightened. My back looked her dead in the eye and said, "Funny you're preaching about sin, considering what you did." Her eyes flickered, just for a second, but I saw it, that flash of panic, that tiny crack in her mask. "I may be pregnant out of wedlock," I said, loud and clear, "but at least I didn't get rid of the evidence and pretend it never happened." You could hear a pin drop. No one moved. No one spoke. My mother had. Her hand clamped over her mouth, eyes wide. My dad was frozen, staring between us like he couldn't even process what he'd just heard. One of my cousins dropped their glass, and it shattered against the tile. But even that didn't break the silence. My sister didn't deny it. She didn't scream or call me a liar. She just stood there, pale, shaking, mouth slightly open like she was trying to breathe through a wave of shame that had finally caught up to her. Then she turned around and walked out. No words, no apology, no dramatic exit line, just the sound of her heels on the floor as she left the dinner table, left the house, and disappeared into the night. It was surreal. I just sat there, heart pounding, trying to slow my breathing. I didn't regret it. Not in that moment. I felt like I'd ripped off a mask she'd been hiding behind for years. I wasn't proud of how it happened, but I was tired of being her punching bag, tired of watching her parade around like the moral authority while the rest of us lived in the shadows of her fake perfection. But that feeling of power, it didn't last long. My mom finally broke the silence. She stood up furious and rounded on me like I'd just set the house on fire. "What is wrong with you?" my mom shouted, her voice shaking with anger. "Why would you do that tonight? You've ruined everything." I just blinked at her. Ruined everything? Wasn't this supposed to be a celebration? Weren't we here to share good news? My pregnancy, the start of something new? Apparently not. Apparently the bigger problem was me daring to speak the truth out loud. I tried to explain. Tried to tell her I didn't plan it, that I snapped because I couldn't take being publicly humiliated by someone who was hiding worse. But it didn't matter. My mom was too furious to hear me. She kept pacing, ranting, about how I'd embarrassed the family, about how I'd dragged up something that didn't need to be said. But here's the thing. My sister made it need to be said. She pushed me, cornered me, judged me in front of everyone and expected me to just take it. And for what? To protect her secret? To keep up the illusion that she was better than the rest of us? Not anymore. She was done playing the saint, and I was done letting her. I turned to my mom and said, "Maybe I did ruin your evening, but she's been ruining lives with her judgment for years. I just gave her a taste of her own medicine." That shut her up for a second. Then she just shook her head and walked off, mumbling something about needing air. One by one, the rest of the family trickled away too. Some shocked, some awkward, some pretending to check their phones like nothing happened. I was left sitting there in the glow of candles and cooling dinner plates, wondering if I'd just lost more than I gained. The next morning, I woke up to silence. No texts, no calls, no congratulations, just a few notifications from social media, and even those felt hollow. I checked my messages, half expecting my sister to unleash some fiery condemnation or passive-aggressive Bible verse, but there was nothing. She went completely silent. And my mom? She didn't reach out either. The woman who'd cried tears of joy at the announcement of her first grandchild had now ghosted me because I stood up for myself, because I dared to speak a truth that she wanted to keep buried. I won't lie, it hurt. It hurt to see how quickly people turn cold when you stop playing nice, when you stop protecting the narrative they're comfortable with. But at the same time, it felt like breathing again. For the first time in years, I wasn't carrying my sister's secret on my back. I wasn't nodding along while she preached purity and judged others from her pedestal. I wasn't letting her shame me into silence. I was finally free of her shadow. A few days later, my dad called. He didn't say much, just asked if I was okay. I said I was. He paused, then said, "She had it coming." That was it. Maybe not a full endorsement, but enough to make me feel like I hadn't completely lost everything. It's been a few weeks now. My sister still hasn't spoken to me. Neither has my mom. I heard through a cousin that she's been taking time to heal and processing the betrayal. Funny how telling the truth becomes betrayal when it challenges someone's lies. But here's what I know. I didn't ruin our family. I didn't create the divide. She did. She spent years weaponizing her faith, judging people with no room for grace, and pretending to be something she wasn't. She hurt me with her words the night of that dinner, and I let her, until I didn't. I'm not perfect. I never claimed to be, but I'm not ashamed of this baby. I'm not ashamed of the life I'm building, and I won't let someone else project their hidden guilt onto me just to keep their fake image intact. Sometimes the truth causes damage, but sometimes damage is the only way to clear out the rot. Do I feel bad about what I said? A little. Not because it was wrong, but because I know it cut deep. I didn't want to be the one to do that, but she left me. No choice. This wasn't about revenge. It was about finally drawing a line. I didn't start the war, but I ended it. And now, on to the next story. My ex cheated with my sister, so I aborted his child. I, 30F, was with John, 32M, for over 4 years. We weren't perfect, who is? But I thought we had something solid. We'd weathered job changes, a miscarriage 2 years ago, and even a brief long-distance stint when I had to relocate, temporarily for work. It hadn't always been easy, but I truly believed we were committed to growing through it together. Looking back now, I realize I missed some signs. There were nights when he was more distant than usual, moments where he'd seem preoccupied, and this creeping sense that he was somewhere else mentally, or maybe even emotionally. But every time I asked, he brushed it off as stress or work, fatigue. And I believed him. I wanted to believe him. The truth shattered everything. One Saturday night, my sister Lauren, 28F, called me in tears. I assumed something had happened, maybe a breakup or a fight with Mom, but what she confessed, it broke me. She told me she had slept with John, not just some nameless stranger, not just a random woman. My sister. It was a one-night stand, she said. A moment of weakness, one she regretted immediately. But John? He didn't sound remorseful at all. In fact, when I confronted him, he looked me dead in the eyes and said, "We both knew this wasn't working anymore. The spark's been gone for a while." The spark was gone? Maybe for him. But I had been trying. I had been fighting for us. And instead of having a difficult but honest conversation with me, he chose to betray me in the most gut-wrenching way, with my own blood. They didn't even try to deny it. In fact, within a few weeks of our breakup, they made their relationship public, as if I was the one holding them back, as if what they did was just the natural conclusion of something already dying. I moved out of our shared apartment and cut them both off. I didn't scream. I didn't key his car. I didn't blow up Lauren's phone with rage texts. I went quiet. But inside, I was destroyed. Betrayal from a partner is one thing. Betrayal from your sister, that's another kind of pain entirely. And just when I thought I was starting to rebuild, to breathe again, something else hit me. I was pregnant. When I saw those 2 pink lines, I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. It felt like a cruel joke from the universe. After everything, the betrayal, the emotional collapse, the humiliation. Now this? A baby? My first instinct wasn't even fear. It was numbness. I sat on the bathroom floor for what felt like an hour, just staring at the test. I kept waiting. For it to change, for it to say something else. Something easier. I was angry. Not at the baby, of course, but at the situation. At John. At Lauren. At myself, for still somehow caring what any of them would think. I didn't want to hide it from him. I figured he had a right to know. So I did the right thing. I called him Big Mistake. The second I told him I was pregnant, he exploded. No hesitation, no concern, no pause to even ask if I was okay. Just pure, unfiltered rage. He accused me of trying to sabotage his new relationship. Said I was trying to trap him. Told me I was jealous and pathetic and that I needed to move on like he had. Then he hung up, blocked me on everything. For a while, I just sat there with the phone still in my hand, stunned. I hadn't expected him to be excited, but I also hadn't expected that level of hatred. It was like I was talking to a stranger, a cruel, hateful stranger who used to share my bed. Still, I tried to give him a chance. I emailed him, texted from a new number, even messaged him on a platform I knew he rarely checked. Nothing got through without being met with anger or silence. Eventually, I wrote one final email. This time, I included a photo of the pregnancy. Test. I told him he had exactly 1 month to contact me, to talk like an adult, like a co-parent, like a human being. I told him if I heard nothing, I would terminate the pregnancy. I was clear, calm, and painfully honest. It wasn't a threat. It was a boundary. And then I waited. The weeks crawled by. Every day I checked my email like clockwork. Every ding from my phone made my heart jolt. A small, delusional part of me hoped he'd come to his senses, that he'd realize this was bigger than our drama, bigger than his new relationship, bigger than his ego. But silence has a sound. And I heard it loud and clear. I went to my first doctor's appointment alone. Confirmed the pregnancy. Got a folder full of pamphlets and prenatal care instructions I didn't ask for. The nurse was kind, but I could tell she thought I looked distant, maybe even cold. I wasn't. I was just trying to survive. Meanwhile, my job was ramping up in ways I never expected. I had just been promoted, something I'd worked toward for almost 3 years. It meant more money, more responsibility, and the real possibility of relocating to another city within the year. I was on the cusp of something I'd fought hard to earn, but I also knew that if I went through with the pregnancy, I'd likely be doing it alone. No partner, no father figure, no co-parenting plan, and certainly no help from John, who had chosen to ghost me in favor of playing house with my sister. And that's when I realized I wasn't just deciding about a baby, was deciding about me. I thought about what kind of mother I'd be if I resented the life I gave up. I thought about how unfair it would be to bring a child into a world where their father wanted nothing to do with them, and their aunt was the reason their parents broke up. What kind of story would that child inherit? I made the appointment. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't emotional in the way people assume. I sat with the choice for days. I cried. I prayed. I sat on my bed for hours, not moving, not eating. But in the end, I knew what I had to do. A month passed. John never called, so I followed through. Afterwards, I sat in my car in the parking lot of the clinic and just stared out the windshield. My hands trembled a little. There was no dramatic breakdown, just a heavy, cold stillness in my chest. It wasn't a decision I made lightly, but it was mine. I didn't go home right away. I parked by the water, a quiet spot I used to visit when I needed to think. The same spot John and I once sat together during a rainstorm, talking about baby names we liked, back when things were different, back when I thought love could fix anything. This time, I sat alone. I thought I'd feel relief, maybe a rush, of clarity or certainty. But instead, I felt hollow, not regretful, just emptied out. like my body had caught up to what my heart had been dragging around for weeks. Loss, confusion, exhaustion. And despite all that, I knew I'd done what was right for me. I didn't regret the choice. I regretted the circumstances that led to it. The betrayal, the abandonment, the cruel timing of it all. I had wanted a family once. I had wanted his child once. But not like this. Not in chaos. Not without love. That night, I finally posted something on social media. I didn't go into graphic detail. I simply wrote, "Sometimes choosing yourself feels like loss, but it's still choosing. And I chose me." I didn't name names. I didn't mention John or Lauren. I wasn't trying to make a statement, just trying to breathe, to release something. A few hours later, I got a call. Blocked number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me swipe. It was John. His voice was low, shaken. Did you go through with it?" I hesitated. Yes. He was silent for a beat. Then his voice cracked. He started yelling, not with rage, with grief, accusations, mixed with sobs. "How could you do this to me? That was my child, too. You didn't even ask me, you just took them away." And that was the moment I realized something important. He hadn't reached out for me. He hadn't called to apologize. He hadn't cared enough to respond when it mattered. Now that the decision was done, now that the power was gone, he wanted to play the victim. I let him scream for a while, not because he deserved the space, but because I needed to hear it. I needed to hear how quickly he could twist the truth to make himself the wounded party. It confirmed everything I already knew about him. When I finally spoke, I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I was calm, eerily calm. "You blocked me, John. You hung up when I told you I was pregnant. I gave you time. I gave you options. And you gave me nothing." He tried to interrupt. Something about how he was in shock and needed space, but I kept going. "I told you what I planned to do. You didn't care until it was too late. And now you want to make this about you? You didn't want this baby, John. You just didn't want me to make the decision without you." There's a difference. Silence. Then I said what had been building in my chest for weeks. "You have Lauren now. Go build your perfect life. Go have a kid with someone you didn't cheat on me with. Just leave me out of it." He said nothing. Just breathed heavily, like he was trying not to cry again. I don't know if he was heartbroken, guilty, or just realizing that he lost control of the narrative. I hung up, and I blocked him again. But it didn't end there. I never thought I'd be the kind of person to go through something like this. Always pictured motherhood as something joyful, shared, a decision made with love, not in isolation. But life doesn't always hand you the version of the story you imagined. Sometimes it throws you into a plot twist you didn't ask for, and leaves you holding the pen. What haunts me most isn't the decision I made. It's the fact that I had to make it alone. John had every chance to be part of this. He had every opportunity to show up, not even for me, but for the child we created. Instead, he weaponized silence. He used his absence as punishment. And when that failed to control me, he came crawling back with tears and accusations, hoping guilt would do what manipulation couldn't. But by then it was already done. It was never about the baby for him. It was about power, about control, about framing himself as the victim in a situation he chose to ignore until it was convenient to care. So now I live with it, not with shame, but with weight. The weight of a choice no woman should be forced to make alone. The weight of betrayal from not one but two people I trusted most in the world. The weight of a future that could have been different, but wouldn't have been better. And yet, despite the noise, despite the family texts, the judgmental DMs, the whispered gossip from people who only know one side, I still come back to the same truth. I chose myself. I chose peace over chaos, autonomy over manipulation, a future I could shape instead of one I'd constantly be surviving. But still, sometimes at night, the question creeps in. Was I the a-hole, or was I just the only adult in the room? And now, on to the next story. The CEO laughed off my bonus. The court wiped that smile off his face. I joined a small startup in the early 2000s, full of idealism and ambition. It wasn't the money that lured me in, far from it. The salary they offered was, well, let's just say it was survivable, not comfortable, but I didn't care. I was hungry to learn. The work was deeply engaging, challenging, and filled with the kind of complexity that teaches you real skills, the kind you carry with you for life. So even though the finances were tight, I told myself this would all be worth it. I could feel it. This job was going to launch my career. Now, part of the agreement was that there'd be no paid overtime, and I was fine with that, on one condition. We agreed I'd be evaluated after 3 months and then annually. It was all pretty standard. No tricks, no traps, just a fair startup hustle. At least that's what I believed at the time. Fast forward 3 years. Not 3 months, 3 years. I'd helped bring in 10 strong clients, kept a dozen more in active trial phases, and the company had a healthy stream of money coming in. We weren't talking millions yet, but we were stable. We were growing, and the promise of future success was no longer a fantasy. It was tangible, and I was still on that same salary, working unpaid overtime almost daily. So I brought it up. Not aggressively, just reasonably. Discussions about back pay and paying overtime finally started to happen. Everyone, including management, acknowledged it was overdue. Since back pay for overtime wasn't technically legal in our region, the workaround was calling it a discretionary bonus. Fine. Call it what you want. Just pay what's owed. The sum by then? Around $50,000. But I wasn't greedy or demanding. If cash flow was a problem, I even suggested they offer me discounted equity instead. That was legal, and I genuinely believed in the company's future. I wasn't looking to cash out. I was trying to build something with them. At first, it looked like they were considering it. We had email exchanges, documents, written confirmations. It all felt professional. I was secure in the idea that they wouldn't screw me over. Why would they? We were building this together. Except, the tone started to shift. Suddenly, things were taking longer. We'll get back to you. We need more time. The kind of vague, slow-stalling responses that start to set off quiet alarm bells in your head. Still, I gave them the benefit of the doubt, and that's when they made the offer. An equity stake. Sounds fair, right? But this wasn't equity in the company I had helped grow. It was equity based on a fictional valuation. According to their figures, the company was now worth hundreds of millions of dollars, despite having just 9 employees and a projected annual turnover of maybe $2 million. Under that math, my reward would be less than 0.01% ownership. Basically worthless. It wasn't just insulting. It was a calculated slap in the face. That offer broke something in me. After all the overtime, the weekends lost, the personal sacrifices, this was their idea of fair compensation? A microscopic stake in an imaginary fortune? I sat there staring at the numbers in disbelief, the email still open on my screen. It wasn't just a lowball, it was a middle finger. So I responded the only way I could. I resigned, effective immediately. Now technically I was still under the terms of my original contract. Remember, the one the CEO refused to update despite years of work? That meant I had a 1-month notice period, plus a backlog of unused paid leave. And thanks to the wording in the contract, that effectively meant I didn't have to work another single day. Not one, when I handed in my resignation. That day, the CTO went pale. Total panic. My role wasn't easy to fill, and they hadn't seen this coming. They thought I'd just swallow the insult and keep grinding away like I always had. They thought wrong. I packed up my things, walked out, and never looked back. The very next morning, I sent a registered letter to the company, formally requesting payment for my accrued overtime and the so-called discretionary bonus they dangled in front of me. I knew they'd reject it, and they did. Cold, formal language, no bonus, no overtime pay, nothing was owed. They closed the letter as if it were a done deal, but what they didn't know was this. I'd already spoken to a lawyer. See, in that region back then, legal action wasn't common. Most employees just moved on and grumbled to their friends. Lawsuits were rare, and employers knew it. They banked on your silence. But I wasn't staying silent. Not this time. With the attorney's help, we reviewed everything. Emails, timelines, the contract, labor law. And here's where it got interesting. Legally, employers in our jurisdiction were fully liable for unpaid labor. There were no gray areas. If you worked and weren't paid for it, that was on them. No exceptions. And there was one more detail. One that would become the centerpiece of my plan. The law allowed 7 years to make a claim. But in cases of unpaid wages, not only could I still file after 6 years, I could demand interest at 9% above base rate, compounded daily. At that time, that meant over 12% annual interest, growing every single day the payment was overdue. Most people would have jumped on the chance to settle fast. But me, I saw an opportunity. A long game. Instead of filing the claim immediately, I asked my attorney a bold question. What happens if we wait until just before the 7-year deadline? He raised an eyebrow, so I explained. If we waited until the 6 years and 11 months mark, the interest on the unpaid amount would be massive. Remember, the original unpaid overtime was around $50,000. At over 12% interest, compounded daily, that number was going to snowball. And according to the law, that interest was owed, not optional. There was a risk, of course. If the company folded, I'd get nothing. But at the time, they were growing, making headlines, and clearly thriving. I decided the gamble was worth it. I'd already been cheated out of what I earned. Waiting a few more years just meant they'd pay what they should have paid in the first place, plus every cent they tried to save. So I played it cool. I moved on with my life, got a new job, kept climbing the ladder, built the career I always wanted. But every now and then, I'd check in on that old company. They were doing well. Surprisingly, well, actually, the CEO was still there. They expanded their client list, even moved into a bigger office space. Meanwhile, the clock kept ticking. At the 5-year mark, I sent them a final letter, another registered one, stating that unless full payment of all owed and accrued amounts was made immediately, I would pursue legal action. They ignored it again. Perfect, because at that point, I wasn't trying to get them to pay voluntarily. I was just adding more fuel to the fire. Every day they refused to pay was another few dollars in interest, another tally mark on the legal timeline. I wanted them to get comfortable. I wanted them to believe they were off the hook, and I wanted to make sure there'd be no escape when the time came. Almost 7 years to the day after I left that company, I walked back into my attorney's office, file in hand, every email printed, every letter documented, and every piece of communication backed up. We filed the claim. The total amount I was demanding at that point, $112,000. That was just the back pay plus the interest that had been snowballing for years. But that wasn't even the final number. See, as we were going through everything, my attorney pointed out something else I hadn't even factored in. Under the labor laws, there were fixed penalties for each instruction given to an employee to perform uncompensated overtime. Every single, "Can you stay late and finish this?" that was never followed by compensation could now be monetized. When the final paperwork was filed, the full claim totaled around $135,000. Let that number sink in. From their perspective, this came completely out of nowhere. They hadn't heard from me in years. They assumed the silence meant I had given up. But now, nearly a decade later, they were being dragged into court over a discretionary bonus they thought I'd forgotten. And not just that, they were being hit with one of the largest individual compensation claims their company had ever seen. And the CEO, oh, he lost it. I got a phone call the same evening we had filed. I didn't answer it live, because I had a hunch what it might be. I let it go to voicemail and set the recorder. And wow, the voicemail was everything I expected and more. He screamed, cursed, called me every name in the book. He accused me of betrayal, of setting him up, of trying to ruin him. He sounded completely unhinged, which for me was gold. Because, in our jurisdiction, recorded abusive communication tied to a legal proceeding could be submitted as evidence, especially when it demonstrated the attitude and intent of the defendant. So we added it to the file. Every furious word, every insult. And when the day in court finally arrived, the judge listened. From the moment the judge hit play on that voicemail recording, the mood in the courtroom shifted. The CEO's voice, loud, furious, slurring. Insults echoed through the chamber. It wasn't just unprofessional, it was damning. Any shred of sympathy the judge might have had for the company evaporated with every expletive-laced sentence. And the worst part? That was just the opening act. Once my attorney presented the full chain of emails, including the ones acknowledging the unpaid overtime, the so-called bonus, and my requests for fair compensation, the judge's expression turned from annoyed to outright disgusted. It was all there in black and white. Company management knew I had worked overtime. They acknowledged discussions of compensation. They offered a worthless equity deal instead of actual payment, and then they stonewalled me for years. The defense tried to argue it was all discretionary, but the evidence showed intent to mislead. The judge made it clear. Discretionary doesn't mean optional, not when work was performed and acknowledged. Then came the final blow. The judge ordered the company to pay the full $135,000 immediately and without delay. On top of that, they were required to cover every cent of my legal fees. And as if that weren't enough, the judge notified the Department of Labor, triggering a full audit into the company's wage practices. The room was silent except for the sound of the CEO's jaw hitting the floor. I didn't celebrate. Not yet. I waited. Just 1 week after the ruling, the company paid up, every last cent. I watched the balance hit my account with the kind of satisfaction that doesn't come from greed. It came from justice. I had waited nearly 7 years, but in the end, they gave me everything they owed, and more. But the story didn't end there. That same night, mere hours after the court handed down its decision, the CEO apparently decided to drown his rage at the local bar. Witnesses said he was drinking heavily. Maybe he thought blowing off steam would help him forget the public humiliation. Maybe he didn't care anymore. Either way, it was a terrible decision, because not long after leaving that bar, he got behind the wheel of his brand-new Mercedes S-Class and drove it straight into another car. He was arrested on the spot, charged with a DUI, and promptly had his license suspended for 6 months. As for his car, totaled. And the insurance company, they refused to pay a dime. Driving drunk voided the coverage. In one day, he lost the case, lost his money, lost his license, and wrecked his car. He had laughed off my bonus years earlier. But now, no one was laughing. That court decision didn't just pay me back. It wiped the smirk off the man who thought he could underpay, undervalue, and underestimate the people who built his company. And it reminded me, and hopefully everyone else watching, that sometimes the best revenge isn't loud. It's patient, strategic, and hits right when they least expect it. And now, on to the next story. The rookie who betrayed our lieutenant and the revenge that ended his career. I joined the volunteer fire department in the early 2000s because I wanted to do something that mattered. I wasn't chasing glory or adrenaline. I just wanted to help people. The town's fire department had a volunteer program that trained regular folks like me to step up during emergencies. It wasn't easy. We trained hard, 2 nights a week plus all-day Saturdays for 3 straight months. That was just the fire side. After that came another 3 months of EMT training. It was a grind, but it shaped me. About a year in, something changed. I wasn't just the new guy anymore. I'd earned a little respect. I knew how to haul gear, run drills, and keep my head in the heat. That's when they asked me to help train the incoming academy class. It felt like an honor, and honestly, I was excited to give back. Helping others grow into the role just felt right. That's where I met Lieutenant Amy. And let me tell you, she was unforgettable. Amy was maybe 5 feet tall on a good day, but she had more fire in her than anyone I've ever met. Middle-aged, sharp as a whip, and absolutely fearless. She didn't take crap from anyone. You know the type? Someone who could make a grown man freeze with just a glance. She was a drill sergeant when she had to be, but off-duty? She had this huge heart. She used to bake cakes and drop off cookies at different stations. No one asked her to. She just did it because she cared. In the firehouse, respect isn't given easily. You've got to earn it through grit, consistency, and integrity. And Amy, she earned every ounce of it. People looked up to her, and not just because she could outwork guys twice her size. She set a tone. She led by example. She showed us what real leadership looked like. I admired her a lot. Still do, actually. That training class she and I helped with had some promising recruits. But it also had one very specific problem. A cocky kid we'll call Aaron. And trust me when I say, Aaron had no idea what kind of world he was stepping into. Aaron strutted into the academy like he was auditioning for an action movie. Young, probably early 20s, with a chiseled jaw and that cocky all-American I'm better than you energy. You know the type. He talked big, loud, confident, full of stories about things he'd done or seen, none of which made sense for someone with zero actual firefighting experience. If you didn't know better, you'd think he'd already single-handedly saved a family from a burning building and then carried a puppy out for bonus points. But when the drills started, the truth surfaced fast. He was fine. Not terrible, but not great either. Middle of the pack. He could haul a hose, climb a ladder, and do all the things we trained for. But there was no finesse, no humility. Everything he did with a look that said, "Are you watching me?" It was like he believed the academy was just a formality. Before he moved on to become the next national firefighting icon. When the class graduated, assignments were handed out, and by sheer dumb luck, Aaron landed at Amy's station. It was one of the quieter stations in the department. Mostly medical calls, minor fires, false alarms. Nothing like the chaos he probably thought he'd be diving into. But it was a solid place to learn under a strong leader, especially someone like Amy, who believed in mentoring her crew. I remember thinking, maybe this is good for him. Maybe Amy will straighten him out. She'd dealt with cocky types before and usually turned them into respectable firefighters. But Aaron, he wasn't just cocky. He was entitled. And that's a much harder fix. Still, I tried to stay out of it. He wasn't my problem anymore. I had my own crew, my own responsibilities. But the firehouse is a small world. Word travels. And it didn't take long before his name started popping up in casual conversation, and not in a good way. At first, it was small things, disrespectful comments, rolling his eyes during briefings, ignoring protocols. But then came the story that really turned my stomach, and once I heard it, I couldn't let it slide. It was a slow evening at our station when Amy dropped by unannounced. She strolled in with that no-nonsense swagger and a giant box in her hands. Inside, a full half of the infamous motherlode cake from Claim Jumper. If you've never had it, imagine a 6-layer chocolate monster capable of knocking out even the most sugar-hardened firefighter. Amy smiled and said, "Figured you guys might appreciate this." And we did. Absolutely. Turns out she'd taken her entire crew, including Aaron, out to Claim Jumper as a treat. No birthdays, no celebrations. Just Amy being Amy. Kind, generous, always doing more than she had to. 8 people, full meals, drinks, appetizers, and the enormous cake. On her own dime. For some of us, that kind of gesture might have been once in a career. For Amy, it was just a Tuesday. We thanked her like she was royalty. She brushed it off with a laugh and said something like, "You guys work hard. Someone should show you it's appreciated." Then she waved us off and left, probably to bake muffins or patch up a rookie's bruised ego. That's who she was. After she left, we devoured the cake, shared stories, and talked about how lucky we were to have someone like Amy around, not just for the cake, but because of the way she led. You wanted to make her proud. You wanted to earn her respect. That night stuck with me. But a few days later, I stumbled across something that made my blood run cold. I was messing around on MySpace, which at the time was how everyone kept in touch, and decided to look up a few people from the department, just for fun, reconnect, maybe trade a few jokes. I typed in Aaron's name. His profile popped up immediately. What I saw on that page shifted something in me. At first, it was just curiosity. I figured I'd see some shirtless gym photos, maybe a few cringy quotes, typical young guy bravado. But Aaron's page? It was next-level delusion. Front and center was a photo album titled Squad Goals. The cover photo? Him and the other. Rookies at Claim Jumper, laughing, posing, drinks in hand. And there was Amy, right in the middle, grinning like a proud mom. The caption underneath read, "Free dinner courtesy of the old lady. Ordered the most expensive thing on the menu. Might as well take advantage of her stupidity." I froze. Stupidity. That word echoed in my head like a fire alarm. He wasn't joking. There were dozens of comments, some from girls he was clearly trying to impress, where he bragged about how much he ordered, how he milked it for all it was worth, how Amy was too dumb to notice, like she was just some naive sugar, mama instead of the veteran firefighter who'd carried half the damn department on her back, and it didn't stop there. He had videos up of himself training, overlaid with dramatic music, like he was some war hero. He talked about storming burning buildings, saving lives, and being the real deal. All lies. Aaron had barely graduated. He hadn't even been certified as an EMT yet. His biggest contribution at that point was carrying equipment and fetching water. And yet here he was, strutting across his digital stage, soaking in likes and flirting with girls who didn't know better, trying to play the hero in a story he hadn't earned. I kept scrolling, hoping maybe this was just a one-off, a stupid mistake. But post after post, comment after comment, it became clear Aaron wasn't just arrogant. He was a fraud, a liar, and worst of all, he was spitting on the generosity of someone who had only ever tried to help him. That was the moment something shifted in me. I wasn't just annoyed anymore. I was livid, and I knew exactly what I had to do. I stared at his MySpace page for what felt like hours. Each post was a punch to the gut. Each smug caption felt like it was mocking not just Amy, but everyone who actually took this job seriously. I remembered the cake. I remembered the long nights Amy spent training recruits, running drills, staying late, giving more than anyone ever asked of her. And now I saw this kid, this punk, openly mocking her for it, using her kindness as a punchline. It made me sick, but more than that, it made me angry. Because it wasn't just about Amy anymore. It was about what it meant to wear that uniform, to earn your place. Aaron had skipped the hard part and jumped straight into the role of hero in his own. fantasy. And worse, he was dragging down someone who had spent years actually doing the work. At that point, I realized I had two choices: ignore it and hope someone else eventually called him out, or take a stand. I chose the second. I started by printing out every post, every photo, every bragging comment I could find. His words, in his own handwriting. No exaggeration, no misinterpretation, just his raw stupidity on paper. Then I made copies. Lots of them. Every fire station in our department had a common room, a place where guys hung out between calls, where notices got pinned, where gossip traveled like wildfire. So I visited each one, slipped a copy into the common room inbox, left one in the rec area, taped a few to the corkboards under general announcements. And because we were still rocking old-school tech, I used our department paging system, the kind where you could send out text messages across stations. I kept it short, just a line or two. Check out what Aaron really thinks of Amy. His MySpace is still up, for now. Attached was his profile link. I didn't sign it. Didn't need to. Within an hour, the entire department was buzzing. It didn't take long. I was still at my own station when I heard the first reaction. Someone from the next room let out a long, loud whistle. "Yo, did you guys see this? Aaron's, toast." Laughter followed. Then someone else came in holding one of the printouts. Word was spreading, fast. The paging system message had done its job. Everyone in the department had seen it. People were talking, sharing the printouts, going straight to his profile to see the trash for themselves. It was like setting off a chain reaction, one little spark, and suddenly the whole network was lit up. Aaron didn't stand a chance. I refreshed his MySpace page about 20 minutes later. Half the pictures were already gone. By the hour mark, all the posts had vanished. A few hours after that, the page was completely deleted. Vanished like it had never existed. But it was too late. The damage was done. Because the truth? Once something circulates through a firehouse, you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. Reputations are built slowly, but they can collapse in a single afternoon. And Aaron's collapsed hard. I never saw him again after that. He stopped showing up to his assigned shifts. No explanation, no farewell, just disappeared. A few weeks later, someone mentioned he'd formally quit the department. No one seemed surprised. No one seemed to miss him either. It felt satisfying. Not because I wanted to ruin someone's life, but because what he did, what he said, was so deeply disrespectful to someone who had given so much. Amy had poured her heart into leading that crew. She'd invested time, money, energy into people like him. And for what? To be mocked behind her back by a kid who hadn't even earned his stripes? No, that didn't sit right with me. It never would. So, I made sure he felt the weight of his actions, and that everyone else saw it too. A couple of weeks after the dust settled, Amy stopped by our station again. This time, no cake. Just her usual calm, composed self. But I could tell. Something was different. Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. I waited until we were alone, then pulled her aside. "I was the one who sent the page," I said, "about Aaron. I saw what he posted. I saw what he said about you." For a second, she didn't say anything, just looked at me, and when she finally did speak, her voice was softer than I'd ever heard it. "I figured," she said. Then she looked away. For a moment, and I saw it. Real hurt in her eyes. Not rage, not outrage, just disappointment. Amy had built her whole career on believing in people, investing in them, and Aaron had taken that generosity and turned it into a joke. "I'm sorry," I added. "I just couldn't let him get away with it." She gave me a small nod. "Thank you," she said quietly. "That means more than you know." That was it. No speeches, no grand gestures, just a moment of shared understanding between two people who actually cared about the badge they wore. After that, Amy bounced back like she always did. She kept training recruits, kept leading with the same fierce integrity that had earned her everyone's respect in the first place. A few years later, I heard she'd started dating one of the fire chiefs, someone else who had helped out at the academy. They eventually got married. Last I saw her, she looked happy. Really happy. Like someone who had finally gotten the kind of partner she deserved. We eventually lost touch, but I still think about her from time to time. And as for Aaron, I have no idea what happened to him. Maybe he tried to start over somewhere else. Maybe he grew up. Maybe he's still telling stories that don't belong to him. But I know one thing for sure. He learned, loud and clear, that in our world, you don't disrespect the people who carry you. Especially not someone like Amy, because Sometimes the quiet ones, we fight back harder than anyone expects. And now, on to the next story. 3 years of hell, then I got my revenge on my landlord. I don't use the word hell lightly, but that's exactly what the last 3 years of my life felt like. Every single day I spent in that apartment came with a new problem, a new insult, a new reason to lose faith in people. And the man responsible for it all? My landlord. If you could even call him that. Calling him a human being honestly feels too generous. He made it his mission to make my life miserable. From the very beginning, there were signs. It started with little things. Petty theft, arguments over minor issues. But over time, it spiraled into something darker. He stole from me, not just once, and not something small. My dryer disappeared one day from the shared laundry area. Household items I bought and left in common spaces, gone. No explanation, no apologies, just gone. And it was always him. Then came the money games. One time I had to deal with a plumbing issue, something clearly caused by old pipes and years of neglect, a clear case of wear and tear. But instead of handling it like any responsible property owner would, he pinned the repair bill on me. Hundreds of dollars. I didn't have a choice. I paid it, furious and helpless. And because of that unexpected cost, I was a couple days late with rent the following month. Just once. The only time in 3 whole years. And what did he do? He retaliated, sent me a passive-aggressive letter about my parking spot, then tried to slap on an extra $150 a month. Like I was the problem. There were moments I felt like I was losing my mind. He tried breaking into my place at least once that I know of. God knows how many times he tried when I wasn't home. Every knock on the door sent my heart racing. Every email or letter from him felt like a new threat. And I need you to understand, I was a good tenant. I paid rent on time, religiously. I never caused trouble. I didn't complain or make unreasonable demands. I just wanted to live in peace. But peace was the one thing this man refused to give me. I kept a lot of this pain to myself over the years, telling myself it wasn't worth the legal battle or the drama. But deep down, I knew something had to give. One day, I'd get my chance. One day, I'd make sure he answered for what he did, and when that day came, I made sure he never saw it coming. You might think, well, at least the apartment was nice, right? I wish. That would have made this whole nightmare at least slightly more bearable. But no, this place was a disaster. A slum dressed up with a fresh coat of lies. Let's start with the plumbing. I later found out it wasn't just bad. It was illegal. Pipes that weren't up to code, leaks that went ignored, and a system so old and patched together that it was a miracle water even came out of the faucets. Every shower felt like a gamble. Would I get water, or would I flood? The place? And then there was the porch, the one that looked like it might collapse if a strong breeze hit it. It had been like that for years. Rotted wood, unstable railing, huge safety hazard. And he knew it, he just didn't care. He never fixed it, never warned me, never even acknowledged the danger. I avoided it as much as I could. But every time I stepped out there, I did it with my heart in my throat. Inside the apartment wasn't any better. The ceiling paint peeled constantly, like it was trying to escape just as badly as I was. I'd wake up and find flakes of paint on my bed, my clothes, my hair. There were times I looked around and wondered if this place was even legally habitable. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. The gas heater? Not up to code, not even close. Every time I turned it on, I prayed it wouldn't blow up or poison me in my sleep. I did everything I could to keep the place safe, used space heaters, kept windows cracked, avoided certain outlets. But there's only so much you can do when the person who's supposed to maintain the building is actively making it worse. And still, for 3 years, I stayed. I don't even know why anymore. Maybe because moving is expensive. Maybe because I kept hoping it would get better. Maybe because I didn't want to admit I was stuck. Whatever the reason, I endured it. And through it all, I paid rent, on time, every month, except for that one time, when he forced me to cover the plumbing repair. That one time was all he needed to start punishing me, like I'd broken some sacred oath. But really, it was never about the rules or the rent. It was always about control. He wanted power over me, and he thought he had it, until he went too far. There's a limit to how much a person can take. And for me, that limit came in the form of a letter slipped under my door. I remember it so clearly, thick envelope, typed with his usual arrogant tone, like he was doing me a favor by even informing me. Inside was the notice: my rent was going up by $500 a month. $500. Not because the apartment had been renovated, not because the building improved, Not because of inflation or rising costs. Just because he could. That's how people like him operate. They squeeze every last penny they can until you either bleed dry or snap. And that day, I snapped. I wasn't scared anymore. I wasn't tired. I was furious. After 3 years of silence, I had finally reached my breaking point. And for once, I realized something important. I had nothing left to lose. So I made a decision. One that had been simmering quietly in the back of my mind for years. I was done living like this. Done letting him win. It was time to move. Not just physically, emotionally, legally, mentally. I was going to leave, yes, but I was also going to fight back. And that's when the idea came to me. What if I made a call before I left? What if, instead of walking away in defeat, I left behind a little gift? He thought he could bully me out and pocket an extra $500. What he didn't know was that I was about to cost him far, far more than that. It was time to introduce him to someone he couldn't intimidate. The building inspector. 4 days before my lease ended, I picked up the phone and dialed the local building department. My voice was calm, clear, controlled, but inside, I was burning. I told the inspector everything. Years of abuse poured out of me like floodwater breaching a dam. I didn't hold back. I started with the porch, the rotted, splintering death trap. He finally replaced without a permit. Not only was it still unsafe, it was completely illegal. The inspector took notes, then the plumbing, pipes that moaned and sputtered, installed by God knows who and absolutely not to code. He didn't even blink when I said illegal. He just kept writing. The gas heater, dangerous and outdated. I didn't know the exact laws, but I knew enough to say it was putting lives at risk. Ceiling falling in, paint chips everywhere. I gave him a laundry list so long I almost felt bad for the guy having to write it all down. Almost. To my surprise, the inspector didn't wait until I moved out. He came the next day. I sat by the window, heart pounding, and watched him walk up the steps with a clipboard in hand. He didn't knock, didn't chat, just started measuring, photographing, documenting. I watched him linger at the porch. He crouched down, examined the foundation, shook his head. Then he pulled out a tape measure and walked the length of the platform. It was obvious. This wasn't just a courtesy visit. He was here to build a case. Each violation, $500 per day until corrected. And I gave him a list of violations. I didn't stick around to see the fallout, but I didn't need to. I knew I had finally flipped the power dynamic. He wasn't in control anymore. I was. He wanted to squeeze money out of his tenants? Fine. Now he'd be paying the city thousands just to fix the mess he spent years ignoring. And the best part? He never even saw it coming. If you thought the story was over once I made the call, think again. See, bullies don't like losing control. And when they feel it slipping, they panic. They act out. They get desperate. That's exactly what happened to my landlord in the final days before I moved out. About a week before my lease ended, he showed up out of nowhere and tried to tell me I had to be out by a specific time, not just by the end of the day, but by the hour, as if he was the law, like he had the right to dictate exactly when and how I should leave. I didn't respond. Where I lived, the law was clear. Tenants had until the end of the lease day to vacate. There was no legal requirement to obey whatever arbitrary time he came up with. But he didn't care about the law. He never did. Then came the threats. He warned me that if I wasn't out by his deadline, he'd call the police on me. Said I'd be trespassing. Said I'd regret it. I didn't flinch. Instead, I walked straight into the police station myself that very morning. I explained the situation, the landlord's harassment, his intimidation tactics, his attempt to manipulate the law. I showed them the lease terms, made sure they understood the timeline, and asked that they document my visit. So when he actually did show up stomping around and barking demands, I was ready. He harassed me again, loudly and aggressively, probably hoping I'd just cave and leave early out of fear. But this time, when I called the police, they backed me up. They told him I was fully within my rights, that he had no legal standing to kick me out at that time. They shut him down, and you could see it in his eyes the moment he realized he wasn't winning anymore. The walls were closing in, and he was out of moves, or so I thought. What he did next proved just how far gone he really was. The day I left, I thought I was finally free. I had packed my things, made one last trip to storage, and planned to swing back by the apartment to do a final check before handing over the keys. It should have been simple, peaceful, the end of a long, grueling chapter. But when I returned, the front door wouldn't open, not because it was locked, Not because I forgot the key, but because someone had nailed it shut. Yes, nailed it shut. At first, I thought I was hallucinating. I mean, who even does that? I stepped back and saw the hammer marks, the crude nails jammed right through the frame. My stomach dropped. It didn't take a genius to figure out who was behind it. He had waited for me to leave, and then broke into my apartment, not to steal anything, not even to cause damage, just to trap me out, to send a final message, to say, I win. I stood there, outside my own home, and realized this was no longer petty harassment. This was a crime. So I called the police, again. But this time I didn't just want a report. I wanted accountability. I told them to send a supervisor. I was done playing games with this man. I was done being polite. I was done letting him walk all over me. By the time they arrived, he had already fled. Classic move. He knew he was skating on thin ice. He knew that what he did could land him in serious legal trouble, and this time, it did. The officers took my statement, documented the forced entry, and reviewed my previous complaints. It didn't take long for them to decide that this wasn't just a misunderstanding or a landlord-tenant spat. This was breaking and entering, a felony. They filed a formal report. And just like that, the man who tormented me for 3 years was now facing criminal charges. There's a moment when you've been pushed, bullied, and ignored for so long, where justice doesn't just feel good, it feels transformative. When the police confirmed they were pressing felony charges for breaking and entering, I didn't cry. I didn't celebrate. I just stood there, quiet, breathing it in. For the first time in 3 years, I felt safe. Not because I was out of that apartment, but because he wasn't going to get away with it this time. I got a copy of the police report, black and white proof that his arrogance had finally crossed a line. This wasn't a warning. This wasn't a slap on the wrist. This was serious. He had pushed and pushed and pushed until the system pushed back. And that wasn't all. Remember that building inspector I called before moving out? Every violation that man documented, every inch of unpermitted porch, every pipe out of code, every unsafe fixture, was now racking up 500 a day fines. For a man obsessed with money, that was poetic. I don't know exactly how much he ended up paying, but the point wasn't the money. It wasn't even the charges. It was that someone like him, someone who thought they were untouchable, had finally been touched. And the best part? I never screamed, never threatened, never stooped to his level. I just documented, reported, and waited. Some people think justice is loud, dramatic, explosive. But sometimes, justice is a clipboard, a knock on the door, a set of nails in the wrong hands, and the consequences that follow. He made my life hell for 3 years, but in the end I walked away clean, and he walked straight into a criminal record.
The case has been heard. The stories have been told. Now it's your turn to judge. Leave your verdict in the comments. Like, share, and subscribe. The Court of Stories is always in session.